Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for waiting. Hope you had a good break. We are going to kick off the next session, which is on mental health and the insurance sector. And before I introduce the speakers, we've got a great session lined up for you guys for this one here, where it's more dedicated towards a specific industry of how brokers and insurers see mental health today itself, right? So we've got two great speakers on board today. Let me briefly introduce, and then I'll pass them to also introduce themselves in their roles. First and foremost, we have Krystal Tang, wellness leader at Mercer Singapore, who oversees a lot of the wellness initiatives and solutions that Mercer, the world's largest benefits broker, takes on in the region itself, right? So that's Krystal, and we have Cassandra Low as well, who is the health and wellness lead in Cigna Singapore, a great large insurer who has great benefits, and I'll let her share a bit more later as well. But yes, we're gonna pause the screen and briefly introduce all of the speakers. So let me all right, so we've got all three of you on, but hey, Krystal, hey, Cassandra, good to see you both.
Hey, Theo, good to see you. Hey, Cassandra.
Hi, Krystal.
All right, great. So yeah, as I think you guys know that the theme of this session is really to dig into how for each of you in your roles in your respective companies, Mercer and Cigna, how you guys see mental health and mental wellness, and hear more of that, those thoughts as well. So maybe I'll pass it to you guys to introduce yourself, but before that, for those just tuning in, my name is Theodoric. I am the co-founder and CEO of Intellect, and I'll be hosting and moderating this session to learn from Krystal and Cassandra. So Krystal, if you don't mind, I'll go with you first. Tell us a bit about your role in your company and what Mercer does and sees here as well.
Sure, Theo. First of all, I'm really honored to be here. Your whole entire mental festival is impressive. By the way, very impressive lineup, and also I'm very excited to be here with Cassandra, is also a friend, to speak together on this topic. So for my role in Mercer, I'm the wellness leader and taking care of Singapore landscape itself for Singapore clients, but also a little bit on the regional side. So what I do in Mercer is that I handle all the wellness solutions, all the well-being solutions, I would say, for all our clients, planning their end-to-end, hooking them up with the best market-leading vendors such as Intellect themselves, and also, planning and make sure and organizing whatever needs they may have in the well-being space. So that's the gist of what I do.
Amazing. Thanks, Krystal. That's amazing. Yeah, so you do a lot in work with a lot of different clients and companies, but also solutions on the market that offer different types of benefits. So we'll dig into that in just a second. Cassandra, over to you.
Hi, so I'm Cassandra. I'm the wellness lead here at Cigna Singapore. So thank you, Theo and team, for organizing this event. I did a sneak peek into some of the different programs you had, and it's really impressive, and different people from different walks of life have shared about mental health, and that's great. So at Cigna Singapore, I basically do I consult, plan, and execute programs, wellness programs and initiatives for our corporate clients here. And we also work very closely with our clinical as well as our data colleagues to ensure that our programs achieve measurable outcomes and positive outcomes. So we basically do similar things to what Krystal's team does. We basically try and partner with market leaders, vendors to provide these solutions that are curated to our clients. So very excited to be here and to really talk about this in depth.
Yeah, that's great. And also a great point is you both know each other well as well. So it's such a nice communion of people, mutual friends as well. So great. Awesome. So I want to dig into a bit more into a broader perspective as to how within each of your roles, right, the benefits brokers and the insurance space are quite closely placed that work together closely as well. So I'll pass to each of you. Could you share a bit more about how broadly, since the pandemic has happened, what has changed in your view of benefits for employers or clients that you guys work with as well? So I'm going to the same order to start with. Maybe Krystal, you could share firstly, what has changed for you guys?
So before the pandemic started, especially with, when we do a lot of benefits consulting and well-being comes into place, people were mainly looking at physical health. What do we do in that space? What type of fitness classes, nutrition classes, what can they do? And very little on the mental wellness space. Even if the space comes about, is usually just EAP, and that's about it, right? Then the pandemic hit. we all know it hit like early 2020, if I'm not wrong. I think it was March, if I'm not wrong again. And then we saw that it a surge of ask for mental well-being stuff. And then we had to when we go into benefits consulting, we had to actually talk about mental well-being. A lot of the client relationship managers have actually been asked, what can we do in the mental well-being space? What policies do we have to change? Our employees are feeling very stressed. What can Mercer do to support? What is out there? And that's where I think, even Theo yourself, when we partnered up last year, we've seen that surge this year as to a lot of clients signing up with, digital solutions like yourself, and then, changing their policies. I said a lot of the benefit policies are now changing into adding mental health days, mental health leave, wellness fund. We usually never seen that before. And this year, quite a few companies actually added wellness funds into their organization, just so that employees can use that to support their mental health needs, seek counseling, purchase apps, or even, seek psychological help if needed. So these are the things that we are seeing change in the benefit space.
That's a great point. And you're right. No, I think before passing Cassandra, a big shift that has happened is the focus on employers today wanting to touch on wellness, because it's clearly a big pain point has occurred, right? Where move into a pandemic, moved in lockdown, no more working in the office. Everything has changed, right? The biggest concerns that have arisen, it's my employees doing okay from two lenses. Are they affected, and does it affect them in their own well-being? But also, how does it affect the company themselves as well, right? I think both are quite closely intertwined. So it's good to hear, and we'll dig into this a bit more later. You mentioned a few different things that you see employers prioritizing now, well-being initiatives, programs, even budgets and policies that balance those things. And yeah, we'd love to hear more in a second. Cassandra, what about you at Cigna? How as an insurer has that changed for you guys?
So I think as an insurer, we have the benefits of seeing things from two angles. One is from the actual utilization of and claims of mental health treatments, as well as, of course, the aspect that Krystal spoke about, which is the wellness aspect, right? So from a clinical perspective, you would expect that the pandemic from 2019, I mean, it was the tail end of 19 to the start of 2020 that, the pandemic really hit. And I think it is only in the mid 2020 till now that people are really starting to feel the fatigue, and more awareness has been drawn to mental health. So I would say that our utilization of mental health treatment hasn't increased as much as you would expect in terms of utilization. So I'm talking about a single-digit percentage point in terms of increase of utilization. When I talk about utilization, I'm talking about unique members that are actually utilizing mental health, claiming for mental health, right? However, if you look at the dollar amount, the claims amount from 2019, which is steady state where there was no pandemic, to 2020, and if I look at 2020 to 2021, and if I compare 2021 back to 2019, you would see an enormous increase in dollar amount claimed. So in 2020, comparing to 2019, we saw a 56% increase in dollar amount. If I compare 2021, I mean, now we're only in September. I mean, I only have data till September, but if I just extrapolate it to the end of the year, they continue to go in this rate, we see a 100% increase from 2019 to 2021. So why is that so? Utilization, it's slowly going up, but the claims amount is increasing. It's because mental health, people are starting to realize, and people who actually seek treatment will realize that this is not an acute condition. It is actually a chronic condition. It requires a lot more treatment. And so with the increase in awareness, we will see an increase of utilization. So the question now, and this is a very new thing in the insurance space, before the pandemic, I think very few insurance really focused a lot on mental health. There may be a few, Cigna covered mental health since before pandemic, but I would say a lot of providers provided mental health insurance. But now with more awareness, people will start utilizing. So it is really important to be able to structure the product a little bit better. So that's the clinical claim side of things. Wellness side of things, I'm seeing exactly the same as what Krystal has been seeing. The amount of requests for mental wellness kind of programs have increased in the past. There were more interest in a lot of other programs, but now almost every client that reaches out would want a mental health kind of wellness support. I would say at this point, it is not very clear yet what kind of support they want. So they rely on people like Krystal and myself to try and curate for them. But I think the interest in mental health definitely has increased.
That's a great point. So what I think is that two parts of this, right? You've seen a spike and increase, and similar to what Krystal mentioned, that employers are now wanting to put in place something. They may know what it is, may not know what it is, but they want to put something in place. But beyond that, another point you touched on, which relates towards the actual data that you guys have seen, utilization is fairly steadily there and increasing in some, but what has spiked a lot is actually the claims and how much those people are using it, are actually using it more and more, due to awareness happening, but also due to, I think, a range of different factors as well. But that's really interesting trends that you stated there, whereby folks that have used it are using it much more today and claiming more as well. Great points. Just one question came to mind, right? I think just because both Mercer and Cigna are global companies, how have you seen, right? And this is one that I think is just to get your thoughts on it, the trend from the US counterparts or the global counterparts, and how has that trend adapted towards Asia? Because I'm sure you guys have some eyes on what has been put in place there. Maybe you've seen things that happened 3 years back that in the US, and now it's bringing here as well, right? So how do you see that trend changing? Do you see that it's a similar comparison in trends of us adopting mental health benefits here, or how's it different also? I'll go in reverse. Yeah.
I can go first. So what we have seen, I mean, we all know US, UK, Australia a little, I mean, okay, not little, but they're a little bit fast forward in terms of mental health support. When I was living in the US, almost everyone had a psychologist. That is how different it is, right? And it's so easy to say, on a Friday, people want to ask you out, and they'll all go, oh, I'm seeing my psychologist. I can't. I have a session. I'll see you the next time. So it's so easy for them to add it into a conversation. So right now we have seen the trend in Singapore. Of course, it's not as open yet. The stigma is still there. I don't think I hear anyone going, oh, I got a psychologist session before our lunch. I don't think I can go. People are not going to say that. The stigma is still there. But what we have seen throughout last year is that it's slowly moving towards an open culture of talking about that I'm not feeling okay. First, I'm struggling at work, or I'm struggling at home, or I'm struggling with depression, anxiety, or I'm struggling with, the anxiety, for example, next year when things are opening up, right, Theo, what I'm hearing right now is that people are anxious going back to work, right? The anxiety of, can I actually still stay home? Do I have that flexibility? So people are more open to talk about how they're feeling now. And that's a trend we're seeing versus in the West, people are a lot more open talking about it. And then in Asia, people are not. So the trend is that people are now more open to talking about it. Companies are more open to also wanting to train their managers and all their employees to have an open culture of speaking up. And what we've seen in the solutions part, we did get some US counterpart solutions coming in, but the only thing is that with US solutions comes cultural differences. So that's why I'm so glad solutions like yourselves, Theo, has come in, because that's what we are looking for, and that's what clients are looking for. They want what this US and Australia and UK has, which is all the mental health apps, mental health support, digital platforms. What they all have it, but Singapore is slowly getting there. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of Singapore counterparts are actually building that up. People like yourself building that up, digital platforms, mental health platforms. And that's where I think we are seeing that growth in that space. And I'm really happy to see that even local, Singapore apps such as yourself and MindFi get into the space where even US knows about you guys now, or Canada and Australia knows about you guys now. So, that's, I think, one of the biggest things, and really impressive to see that the past year or so, actually.
That's a great point. So I think just kind of highlighting what you shared. You do see that in the US and in the West, UK, Europe, and the US, Australia included as well. They are a bit more mature in the adoption and education of mental health in those markets. But what you're seeing as well is that it's quickly picking up in Asia and Singapore as well. But one of the key things that matters is actually that local contextualization towards what the needs are here, versus just like a top-down solution that may or may not help exactly. So that's a good point. No, that's great. Cassandra, what do you think? Like, how do you see it from your side as well?
Yeah, I mean, I echo Krystal's thought. I think the pandemic, one really silver lining that came out of the pandemic, it has really pushed us in Asia to really open up about mental health at a faster pace. I think before the pandemic, nobody would have expected us to have such a festival, and nobody would have expected such solutions to come out and be so popular. So I think it's a good demand and supply kind of thing. In the past, there were some solutions. We have some MNCs over here that are trying to mimic what's happening in the US, for example, in the Western countries, and ask for such solutions. But the solutions that were available are only those in those parts of the world, and they are not localized. And I think we really stress the importance of localization, especially for mental health, because context matters in mental health. And so while we were evaluating the different providers, there were those that have been in the market for a long time in the US, for example. The struggle is how to make it relevant and localize, not just the language, but really the context. So when companies like Intellect started coming out, I think it was a perfect time. There was an increase in demand, which then makes sense for Intellect to continue to grow, and then the supply also came in. So I think we are getting there, and I think the kind of support also is starting to look similar. It's not so much clinical treatment, clinical intervention, which is what we have always been stuck with, but now there's a lot more focus on the wellness side of things, the maintenance side of things. What's coaching, for example? In the past, nobody really talked about coaching, behavioral coaching. What are coaches? All we know is probably the psychiatrist, the psychologist, and that's when you have a mental health condition. But is there a need for coaching beforehand? And I think all these things are starting to be built into the Asia context, which is a great thing.
It's a good one, right? So I hear, I think one of the points that you alluded to that I'd like to dig into more, it's the different levels of mental health coverage that's out there, right? It's not just mental health and mental illness and that's it, right? What we're sharing, what we're seeing more and more of awareness towards, it's that mental health is on the spectrum, right? There is proactive support and then there's clinical support as well, right? As you mentioned earlier, Krystal, there are traditional EAPs out there that have been around for decades, and they help in a good way to be a safety net. But what's lacking is something that's a bit more proactive in that sense. So maybe broadly speaking, how do you guys see it, and what is the interest and understanding that you've seen from your clients that how they see mental health as a spectrum, right? From traditional needs that are more clinical towards now a bit more full spectrum support as well. I'll go into the verse. Maybe Cassandra, you could start first.
Sure. Well, I think the front and the back are quite well covered. I think for most companies, they probably understand EAP or at least a hotline as a safety net. And I think in terms of psychiatry, psychologists within their company's network, to ensure that there are these providers in their network of providers, especially if their benefits are cover mental health. I think these are the straightforward ones. The front, which is prevention or awareness, I think more can be done. I think a large reason why EAP's utilization is low is also largely due to the fact that awareness was not brought towards the EAP. A lot of times when I speak to clients, they don't even know, or maybe clients know, but employees do not know that there is actually such resource that's available. So I think with the more webinars that are happening, more EDMs about mental health, more awareness that is driven, I think these two sides will slowly be covered. But I think what we want to focus, like we said, mental health is a continuum. So how do we provide support? Everybody is going to feel stressed at some point. How much stress is too much before you jump on to the clinical intervention? How can we provide support and actually build the kind of skill set, resilience, or problem solving in an earlier wellness maintenance phase, so that it doesn't cross into clinical as much as possible? But if it does, that there is no more stigma, and so people can reach there. So I think when we speak to clients, this is what we try to explain and try to draw the entire holistic mental health picture. I would say most are very receptive to the end and the head, and I think more awareness needs to be built to kind of join the two ends together.
It's a good point, right? So I'm hearing well, and I think you're saying, and it's a good point that whereby it's a lot of it's not just towards having something there, but also pushing awareness and educating that these things actually help, and how do we connect the dots, right? Because as I said, there are vendors that do a very early stage solution and then vendors that do a more crisis solution, but what connects the dots and what makes it a lot more seamless. It's a key thing that needs to be addressed as well. Great point.
Yeah, and Theo, another important thing is when you connect the dots, it will help people to not see mental health as a like, okay, I am now mentally ill, I am not mentally ill, but it is a continuum. And so everybody is the same. I'm maybe a bit further on, and you might be in the, but it's a continuum, and that itself helps to destigmatize mental health.
Yeah, good point, right? So I think to add to that as well, and to kind of, you brought up a great point, which is the fact that it's a continuum, it's on the spectrum. Mental health is not just you're ill or not ill. There are actually different sides to it. You are healthy, you are stressed, and then you're clinically in need as well, right? That's how we like to describe it. So I think one of the key things is that people have this perception that it's only just clinical historically. So, right, we always see as like, if you're mentally, talk about mental health, it's illness, it's crisis. But what's become very apparent is that a lot of your people's employees today need support on the earlier stages, because we have struggles nonetheless still. We wake up feeling lousy, we have insomnia, we struggle with our spouses, colleagues and stuff. These are struggles, but not clinical in nature. So these folks who have these stresses will never seek support with an EAP or a psychologist, because that's too far online, right? It's clinical, right? They feel, if anything, they feel scared of like reaching out to that form of support, because who knows what happens there, right? Like, will it affect me and stuff like that? But the truth is that these people struggle and they need that support early on. And that's a great point, right? So I'm sure Krystal shares similar views in that sense. But Krystal, what do you think?
Yeah, I really echo what you and Cassandra were saying. Like, when I speak to clients now, everyone's talking about preventative, no longer reactive. I think that's the big buzzword now in the benefit space is preventative, preventative mental health, preventative physical health, and so on and so forth. But I want to stress, what Cassandra is saying, that a lot of the clients, way before in 2019 and before 2019, they were all focused on EAP, which is very reactive. At the end of that spectrum, where people actually seek help when they're critically very stressed or critically needing help. But the thing is, like what Cassandra said, that middle part, no one's actually talking or supporting them at all, right? And employers actually seeing that now this year, which is very interesting to me when they talk to me and they say, Krystal, I don't want to, I already have an EAP, or I realize my EAP is not working because no one's calling until they're very, very stressed, or even when they're very stressed, they don't really want to use the resource. But how about those people in the middle, right? We've done all these webinars to do all the preventative, like, talk about mental health, talk about blah, 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 blah. But how about the middle where they actually want to seek help to talk to a coach? What is out there? And so that's where this year I feel like there was a huge increase of that ask versus any other years. And I guess, like I said, because of the pandemic, that has pushed people forward that way.
That's a good point, right? So I think it's the middle piece that connects the part where a lot of people are in, but it's not being well addressed in that sense. And great point there. So one of the next pieces ahead, right? So this is a bit more, I think, hearing from what you guys have seen as well. So what are the, like from the lens of where, just for context for everyone listening in, I think both of you liaise with enterprise, large companies, clients, HR that want to support their employees in their benefits and health coverage and stuff like that. So maybe to spin another way around, right? So what you both have shared is that there's been a lot more interest in covering mental well-being, mental health, mental wellness. But if I flip it around, what has been the barriers that you see still reside in people you liaise with in Asia today on adopting such solutions in that sense, or being more proactive in that sense? Krystal, maybe you want to go. Oh, Cassandra, go for it.
Oh, Cassandra, you want to go for it?
I can go first. I think, to be fair to employers, mental health is not as structured as physical health. I cannot do a blood test for most conditions. I cannot do a blood test and diagnose. So I think a lot of things become a bit more subjective, a little bit more gray. And so it becomes harder for employers to know, how do we structure a benefit system or benefit program that actually caters to what employees really need? And how do we know that these are working, right? Because I can't take a blood test and say, oh, it's improving. Oh, it's not improving. And so how many sessions is enough for a therapy, for example? Which therapist? There are so many different kinds of therapists. And so which therapist is considered clinically, better, or supported clinically versus something that is not clinically supported. So I think there is still a lot of it's still quite muddled here and in this space, and so that's why there is a little bit more resistance if they do not already have coverage. And that's why I would say it is important to rely on the people who have been working in and out with these solutions. So, for example, in Cigna, we have our case managers. Our case managers will be able to help members know which kind of journey with them throughout this kind of journey. What kind of support do they need? Is it a psychologist? Is it a psychiatrist? Is it a coach, for example? And also we have a care program that will kind of provide that structure. I mean, it is still not a blood test, but it is a structure, a more clinical assessment of how things are progressing. A lot of checkbacks to make sure that the number of sessions are sufficient, that members are getting enough support. I think with this kind of safeguards, it will put clients' minds at ease when they start to embrace such coverage. Otherwise, it's really just like a deep blue ocean, right? You don't know what kind of coverage. Should you give a dollar amount coverage? What kind of support do you need to provide? I think that is probably one of the biggest resistance. What is the ROI? These kind of questions.
Good point, right? So I think it's a great point. And how do you exactly quantify mental health, right? I think that's a big challenge whereby, as you shared, physical health, it's a lot more easier. It's more biological. You have it or you don't. You're healthy or you're not so ideal in like your any measure you're taking. Whereas for mental health, it's a lot more qualitative and there are definitely a lot of evidence-based approaches to actually measure it. But how employers can see the ROI, how can we institutionalize different measures, is still a work in progress for many employers and vendors out there as well. It's a great point there. Hence, I think having that strong grounding in science and research is important to actually prove efficacy in any solution in a sense.
Yeah.
Great point. Thanks, Cassandra. Krystal, what do you think?
ROI. ROI is the big word with employers. Every time I talk to clients is, how is this going to return on my investment when I spend so much money on this, right? And I always tell them like, look, mental health is the only one we cannot quantify. I'm sorry, that's it. Like, you can't force people to go and seek counseling. You can't force people to utilize the solutions that you have, right? But you can promote it. You can promote a culture of well-being in the company to make sure that whatever solutions you put in place, they will take it up, because there's communication, there's promotion, there's that that culture of well-being in the company that you have, that people say, you know what, it's open, I can use it, and I don't mind using it because my company has it for me. That's where you see the take up, utilization go higher. I always tell my clients that we can solely like vendors like you guys, Theo, we're very happy to see that you're able to provide data, analysis and things to clients when, like I said beforehand, there was nothing like that. If I just sold an EAP or I just promoted EAP, they will ask me what the reports. I will say, too bad, I only have utilization report for you. Right?
Which is often low, right?
Which is often very low, and is often the same thing year on year. So they would ask me, what else is that all that the EAP can provide? I say, yeah, because of confidentiality, they cannot provide more. But with the new, the search of you guys coming in, Theo, with digital solutions, future mental health support like you guys, there comes the reports whereby it's more than just utilization. There's engagement reports, there's analytics that come in. What topics are people actually engaging in your app, right? What topics are people actually, picking on or selecting on? And so that makes HR a lot happy to see, hey, people are engaging, and the topics, which are the topics that people are more interested in, and that's where I can actually focus on. So when that happens, then you see the search of take up. If not, the barrier is always there. Like, what's my ROI? If the take up's not there, engagement not there, then why should I use it? I don't want it to be a white elephant in the room. So that's what I've seen, that what companies can move towards is not thinking about ROI as a one whole thing or just a one thing, but thinking RI as, am I actually promoting this as a well-being culture in my company? If even if 20% versus 1 to 3% of EAP utilization that year, and then I take something up that gives me 20%, that's pretty good ROI already, So I always let them see the differences and then make sure that they look at in the big picture rather than narrow picture. If that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think ROI is a big part. How can employees see the benefit, right? Because I think a key part, I'll expand a bit more from our perspective as a solution that works with companies to support their employees' well-being. A key part is, as you mentioned, it's how do you measure that this actually pays back, right? Like, am I investing in a nice-to-have solution? Are there returns on this point, right? So I think just to that element itself, what I'd like to share for employers listening in, for professionals listening in, is that it's a bit of a softer point, but it's really true because mental well-being of an individual, it's at core of the whole company itself. If the people aren't feeling well, they aren't thinking well, they aren't doing well as well. That's what's going to happen, right? So it's going to affect how they work, how they do, and that trickles down towards the company level itself. So individual level perspective, the team level, and then the company-wide level as well. And that's where I think a lot of times, at least in like we try to draw the lines whereby people first, because if they're not feeling well, they're not doing well, and if not doing well, the company gets affected. And I think that's one where it's still a work in progress in a sense, right? Some of the more proactive, forward-thinking companies and employees understand this point pretty well. We just had a session before this with a few HR leaders that touched on these things, and they are forward-thinking employees. But there's always the inverse where employees are thinking about, I'm spending this amount of money. It's not generating sales directly. Where is the ROI? But I think it's a lot bigger than that in that sense, right? So really, really great point there of how do you quantify improved value of something that's a bit harder to measure, but it's intangible, and yet very clear that it matters a lot in this day and age as well. That's an amazing point. So I think one of the questions that I had, I think just sort of pure personal curiosity as well. You guys have been in industry for a while, so you know as well what has happened in the past, what has happened now, and what is going to potentially expect to happen in the future in itself. So it's something a bit different, but and you could also refer this and relate this to not mental health sector, other forms of digital health that you guys have seen as well. But where do you see the trends happening moving forward, right? What do you think are the behaviors that you see employees taking on? What are things that, as an insurance broker yourself, respectively, what are things that you guys want to put in place as well? Two parts in that sense, right? So yeah, maybe Krystal, you want to go first?
Sure. What we are hoping to see, and employers, are probably looking forward 2022 onwards, is they're going to put in place a lot of digital solutions. I think a lot of traditional solutions are already like kind of passe. People asking, everyone's on their cell phone, everyone's on laptops. What can they do digitally to support or gain access a lot easier? I think access to mental health will be one of the top big things next year. Hoping to get, insurers, local insurers on board to actually see how they can actually provide more support to employers in expanding the insurance plans. But that's what we hope as a broker, to see that the insurers themselves will partner with us to expand their mental wellness benefits or actually have a standalone mental wellness plan, because apparently now in Singapore itself, it's very different, like I said, from the forward-thinking countries like the US and Australia in terms of mental health, that they have mental wellness standalone plans. Right now in Singapore, unfortunately, you are not able to get a standalone plan. You get plans that are incorporated into the coverage. For example, like AIA has their Beyond Critical Care, AXA has they joined partnership with Naluri. We recently worked with Aviva last year and did a mental wellness plan, but that is still, you have to buy their coverage or policy in order to get that mental wellness coverage. So that is what we're hoping to see as brokers, that maybe at some point moving forward, that local insurers will see the need to have a standalone plan to help employers cover their employees, at least on a co-pay system or something's easier for them to access.
That's a good point. So the trends you're hoping to see is that there is more adoption into digital solutions, and that insurers, actually local insurers at least, can see that there's value in creating policies that specialize in items like mental health specifically itself. That's a great point. Cassandra, what do you think?
Well, I think in the past, I mean, for Cigna, the angle is a bit different because we have been providing mental health insurance coverage as a benefit for employees. But I think how it would be different for our clients, what we see is in the past, it is reactive, it is more clinical treatment. I think currently now, with all these awareness and all that, we see prevention. Moving forward, what we hope to see would be self-motivated support. So that's where we want to get to, where members feel confident enough to find their solution. So what we did in Cigna early part of this year, we did a markets insight research to talk about, to look at wellness, not just mental health. But what we realized was 30% of respondents actually said, I do want self-help solutions. I do want at my own pace to be able to have certain support or certain content. And when people are self-motivated, that's when you don't have to push utilization, drive utilization, awareness, webinars, EDMs. But it comes from within. It is a self-motivated thing. So we are, from Cigna Singapore's perspective, we are working towards that. While this trend is increasing, and we hope it will continue to increase, especially for mental health, with all these awareness, whether it's from us, from the media, from all that. What we are doing quickly is to provide solutions that are personalized. But of course, for us and for all employers, cost matters. And once I say personalized, it almost automatically sounds like a siren. Cost is going to go up because it's personalized. So the magic in digital solutions is that it's able to offer the kind of personalization in a more collective manner, and that still makes it cost effective. I wouldn't say cheap. Like I wouldn't compare a coaching kind of solution with a crisis hotline that is hardly utilized, right? But I'm talking about cost effective. I'm talking about outcomes, right? The value of the dollar that you spend would give you so much more outcomes. So I think to answer your question, we are seeing this trend. We are seeing increased utilization. We are seeing increased interest from the clients now. But looking at the attendees of mental health webinars in the past, when we organize something, it's probably top down. You see maybe 10, 20 attendees. Now we see hundreds of attendees. So, this is starting to grow. We hope people be more self-motivated. And what do we do as providers? We provide the kind of personalized support to answer to that demand.
Got it. So amazing insight there, right? So I think what it's saying is that there needs to be a few things, right? Personalized solutions that are scalable, digital and scalable, but also there needs to be a point where you hope with the influx of not just solutions, but awareness and movements pushing mental health awareness, that people are more proactive in taking care of their mental health as much as to do with your physical health, right? I think one of the key things that I always touch on to refer for physical health, when we're sick, we see a doctor. When we are not sick, we go to the gym, we have salads, and we eat healthy to be healthy. But what's the equivalent for mental health? There's not so much there, right? We see a psychologist when we are feeling mentally unwell, but healthily, not as much, So I think that's the equivalent point whereby it's so similar, but it's just starting to pick up that awareness of that this applies in the same way as well. But very, very good point there. Super interesting so far. We've got about a few more minutes. Time flies with the session, but I've learned a lot. I think the folks listening have learned a lot as well. One of the key questions one of the questions that just came in, I was just looking at this, and I think it's important to also explain how insurers and brokers, why does it, and this is a very fundamental question that we should have addressed early on, how does it relate towards mental health even? I think for those that may not be as aware of the sector that you guys are in, how do you guys see mental health, right? Like briefly, if you guys could explain from each of your lenses as well.
Krystal, you can go.
Oh, yeah, okay. As a broker, I think mental health wasn't a talk of the town until 2 years ago. I think it's always been at the back of the brokers' minds to, of course, the first thing is to sell insurance plans, group policies, things like that, help the clients. But what Mercer does is we don't want to just focus on one thing. We want to focus on a holistic view of a client. And with the holistic view of the client comes well-being as well, because we all know, like, as a human, we have, physical aspects, we have emotional aspects, financial aspects, and the social aspects, right? And if you don't help employees by helping the employers actually support the employees, then who are we as brokers? So what we usually do is promote a lot of the well-being. That's what brokers do, is besides doing the insurance part and partnering with insurers like Cigna and all the other insurers out there, we also like to partner well-being vendors, because we know that when it comes to taking care of physical health, you also need to take care of the mental health, because mental health is a big thing. Without our mental health, we have almost nothing, because we think what we think is what we do. And mental health is everything. You have to focus at work, you have to focus at home. If you're breaking down at home, you're basically also breaking down at work. We all know it's all interconnected, right? So that's why we always tell our clients everything's interconnected. You want to have insurance, and better also you need well-being as well to support the employees. Because right now we've seen in reports or studies that show that a lot of the young employees coming into work, they're not looking at salary anymore. They're looking at the holistic view of what the company can provide. The salary, the compensation is one thing, but the benefits overview, how they support it, but in their family life, how they're supported in their mental health space, how they're supported in their social space, right? What can the employers do? So when they see a package where everything is included, they will definitely jump on into the company. So what we've seen in my career side when we did reports and studies is that things are moving beyond just salary and compensation. Things are moving towards salary, compensation, as well as well-being. What are you going to provide for me as an employee when I work in this company?
Makes sense. So just to kind of quickly summarize, and I'll pass to Cassandra as well. So what it's saying is that, and it's rightly so stated, that as brokers and benefit brokers, you guys look at not just typical health, but now a lot more towards well-being. And what you're also sharing is that the working population today cares a lot more than just the compensation of their salary, but also what are the benefits and coverage that an employer offers, and that's closely tied towards what both of you offer in that sense as well. So super relevant. Cassandra, what do you think? What are things that you add on?
I think Cigna has the benefit of being very closely linked to our counterparts in the Western side of the world, and we learn from their experience. So very early on, we already know that mental health does have a huge impact on physical health, physical claims, and we see claims utilization, we see utilization of outpatient. It might not be mental health claims, but outpatient claims to the GPs, for example. We know a lot of these are stress induced. We know a lot of these could be mental health conditions that are disguised as or that are caused by stress related conditions. So as an insurer, we don't want to just be paying at the end where for whatever that's claimed. We want to be able to look back and see what is actually causing this increase, what is causing claims for outpatient to increase, what's causing people to see the doctor more, be absent at work more, and we knew mental health was important. The struggle we had was the market that we were catering to were not ready. Not all of them were ready, and therefore the way we structure our plans had to cater to how the demand was in this side of the world. But yes, we are excited to see how this is going to change, and it definitely will, and it will go closer and look closer to the likes of what we have in the other parts of the world.
Actually, Theo, to add to what Cassandra is saying, when you see what we have seen with clients' claims, especially the claims analysis, we've seen so many claims on, like, recently ergonomics issue, like musculoskeletal, right? Headaches, migraines, and people say, oh, these are just like, last time people just kind of forget and be like, oh, maybe just muscle pain, or maybe just having a headache or a migraine is fine. But the claims are so high, and so employers always ask, the clients always ask us, the claims are so high, what's going on behind? And that's where us as a benefits consultant would say, you know what, according to, because we partner with Cigna, according to, Cigna reports and all the, studies and clinical studies to show that high headaches, migraines, it's coming from sometimes high stress. So where is the stress coming from in the organization? Let's, work at that, and let's see how your benefits will look like. And that's why brokers are involved with the whole well-being and mental health space. Yeah.
Really relevant. So I'm just summarizing what Cassandra mentioned and then what you added on as well, Krystal. So it's quite clear that two parts, right? There are solutions out there and there are approaches towards tackling things, but is the demand and the market ready for it in Asia? I think previously, before COVID, not so much yet. It was a bit ahead of the curve. Even though you guys knew, right? You guys could pick from the US and Europe and see what was happening well there, but it needs to kind of match the demand here. And it seems like it's quickly picking up. People have not connected all the dots yet, but they are seeing the struggles in, like you say, claims and headaches, ergonomic and stuff like that as well. But it all ties back to some form towards how mental well-being is tied towards these eventual costs and claims as well. So super interesting. This has been such a great session. I've learned a lot myself. I don't think just the people listening, but I've learned a lot just hearing from you two. So we are at time for this session. We ran a bit 2 minutes long, but first and foremost, thank you both, Krystal, Cassandra, for joining. Really great session. Learned a lot. I'm sure everyone did as well. Appreciate you guys sharing your perspectives from each of your roles and companies as well. Thank you both. It's a busy time for you guys, so thanks for taking time out. I hope you guys both have a great weekend. And this wraps up this session on mental health and the insurance sector. Thank you both so much.
Thank you to you.
for having us.
Cassandra.
Right.
Thank you for having
Thanks,
us.
Krystal. Thanks to you.
See you both.